Record. All right. Special, wonderful treat today. Mr. David is going to join me on some talks about God. I was thinking talks on God. Do you like that title?
Yeah, that's good.
So we're gonna talk about what I want to talk about, and then what David's gonna do is ignore me and talk about what he wants to talk about after I give him a question.
Exactly.
But I have this idea about forgiveness and how it's really a portal that we can access the more eternal portions of ourselves. Like, as in, my mind, it's really not me. I get confused thinking the mind is me, and my body, it's not me. The mind's thinking, the body's feeling, but there's a portion of me that is also me, but it's eternal, right? And I can tap into it. And the way that I can tap into that eternal portion is forgiveness, in that, not calling something bad good, but more like I'm letting go of my ideas about how things should be and how you should be and how I should be. Like, all these thoughts, I'm letting them go. And then as I let them go, as I cut out these things, what remains is more of me, more of that eternal thing. So it's more of a negation discovery as opposed to a learning, finding type thing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't know.
All right, that's it for today.
So the first thing you got to understand is we're multi-dimensional beings, right? So if we're pieces of God, that's big, right? So how come we don't experience that as normal humans? Because we can move our awareness, right? So if consciousness is turning the light on in a room, awareness is the laser pointer. So we are conscious by our nature, but we can move our awareness, right? So actually what you're talking about is moving your awareness to higher frequencies, which then you could say is larger consciousness. If you could move your awareness to the highest level of consciousness, you would have omniscience, right? So as humans, we experience moving our awareness to different levels of consciousness, and we have different experiences. To me, it's almost like if you have a library, that's maybe 1,000 stories high, and each level is appropriate for a certain age. So maybe at the bottom level, it's appropriate for 6-month babies. So anywhere you go on that level of the library, it's baby books, right? You go up one level, okay, now it's for 2-year-olds. Everywhere you go, it's books appropriate for 2-year-olds at a 2-year-old level, right? So you keep going up, and maybe you get up to that level 1,000, and it's books beyond the comprehension of most average people, because it's so complex and deep, right? So that's it. So we use a lot of human terms to describe different levels of our shifted consciousness, right? So forgiveness is shifting up to higher frequency consciousness, from which, of course, you begin to experience higher levels of your true self. But you can shift that up with love, divine love, with courage, with compassion. Those are all higher frequency consciousness from which you begin to experience higher levels of your true beingness. So conversely, anger, resentment, hatred, fear, you're shifting your attention down to lower levels of consciousness. So when you begin to understand the science of shifting your attention, then a lot of the human terms we use to describe human experience, spiritual practices begin to make more sense. And rather than just trying to understand each individual thing, you begin to understand you're just shifting your attention.
Well, that's what the purpose, right? So we can be happy, like my little sign right here.
Yeah.
It's not just a bumper sticker, right? It's
Right.
don't worry, be happy. But the worry it's easy for me to worry when I'm in my mind, even about thinking, why am I not happy, right? I start to stress, I start to
Right.
worry, I start to, and then
Right.
the happy, it's really tapping, it comes from tapping into that higher part of myself or raising my frequency and
Exactly.
relating to a higher.
Exactly.
Would you say it that way?
Yeah, well, so you could take any spiritual practice, you can take any human phrase and begin to analyze it in terms of frequency, of consciousness, right? So don't worry. That's saying let go of that negative or lower frequency of consciousness and replace it with a higher frequency of consciousness, right? So it's saying drop the lower frequency and hold a higher frequency, right? So that's it. So then the question is
Is that our whole thing? Is that the whole kit and caboodle right there, what you just said?
pretty
Drop
much,
drop the lower and keep the
pretty
higher?
much. So we had discussed a book called Backwards by Nancy Dennison, I guess, and I thought she summed it up really, really succinctly.
So good.
It says we're projections of the infinite creator, but in order to have a physical birth, you got to lower your frequency down quite a bit, right, in order to even have a physical birth, right? So she said, then the game, the trick is raise your frequency high enough that you can merge back in, and then everything else is in between, but
we lowered it to play, and now we're raising it back up.
yeah, lower to play, and but I think sometimes it gets so low we forget so much who we are that we kind of get stuck in low frequency, kind of get trapped in it, and we may not we may have a really hard time trying to raise it back up. And I think karma is if you've anchored a lot of your energy at low frequency, that you're pulled back. It's almost like going to a state campsite where they say clean up all your crap before you leave. Right now, if there was a ranger right there, he'd go, no, you can't leave. You got to pick up all that mess you made, right? So in a sense, I believe that's what goes on with our human existence. If you've anchored a lot of your energy at low frequency in this plane, I think it kind of stays there until you raise it back up again. So I think that's really what we call karma, is you keep being presented over and over and over to your low frequency energy that you've anchored till you correct it.
So karma isn't a punishment in that, and looking at it that way.
No, it's not punishment. It'd be like saying gravity's punishment. Gravity is. It's just part of the law of a physical universe. So I think there's laws at play that just are. They're built into this aspect of creation that you can't get around them. They have to be dealt with. So I think a lot of what's being caught in the incarnational cycle is you've made decisions. Another word for decisions is you've created patterns that anchor a certain part of your energy at a certain frequency that is preventing you from raising your frequency high enough to move on permanently to higher levels of beingness. That makes sense? So what'll happen is you keep the situations will keep reproducing themselves, giving you a chance to shift that frequency up to a higher level. So for example, let's just say you committed suicide in a life. Well, you made a choice and created a pattern at a lower frequency that you will just be recreating those circumstances time after time until you make the right decision. So on a scientific level means you now have that energy and you've shifted that energy to a higher frequency. Once you do that, then I think you unanchor that energy and you'll quit recreating that same circumstance because you've moved on. It's like you're familiar with law of one, right? So this may be way over the head of some people watching, but the blue avians, the Ra, they came and helped with the Great Pyramid, and that failed. And so they anchored, they developed karma that they were attached to Earth. So then I think they came back with the law of one thing, and I think that wasn't quite right.
They said every word that we said, they misunderstood 10 words.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And so then the final experiment that I'm aware of is through Corey Good, where he said they told him loving service and high frequency food. Next thing I heard, they're moving on. It's like, so I think they fulfilled their karma, which was merely that they had anchored a certain portion of their energy with a decision and action that wasn't high enough frequency for them to move on past it. And once they corrected that, it's like, oh, we're done. We can move on.
So if we can use the blue avians as an example, maybe just as an anecdote instead of just talking about them, because they were trying to give a bunch of information at first because of how they used it as a higher frequency entity. And they're realizing that humans are selfish and myopic in their view and selfish and controlling. And so like, okay, simplify. Okay, here's the message.
Right.
Loving service.
Right.
I mean, is that
right?
So what is, if that's the case, and by the way, in the context of being happy, I think this is all part of the recipe to be happy, right? Forgiveness ties in there. Loving service ties in there.
Yeah, well, so being happy, I mean, that's just how happy you have to be to move on, right? So I think as you grow in your awareness of yourself, you begin to become more and more sensitive to lower vibrational patterns within you, right? So as you become aware of lower vibrational patterns within you, and you have the opportunity now to correct them. So you could say maybe the ultimate happiness is bliss. So how would you maintain bliss if you had patterns that were lower frequency? You couldn't. It would just be a temporary state. But to have that steady bliss, well, it goes back to one of the things that Nancy Dennison said. She goes, really, there's only one lesson. There's only one lesson. It's manifesting divine love. But as human beings, we got thousands of different situations to learn to manifest it in, right? So I think it's different manifesting divine love in business, different manifesting divine love with your children, with your wife, with your friends, politically, living in a political world. So that's it. It's just one lesson, but that's the human term is divine love. But the scientific term, in my opinion, is keeping high frequency consciousness. Can you keep? Yeah, a lot of times, there's a lot of things I can hold high frequency consciousness, but you start getting into politics with me, it might drop down quite a bit, right? So I have to learn to keep high frequency. So I have to struggle around with, well, how do I look at people that I think are destroying our country? Right? So I have to look at it in a way that allows me to hold high frequency consciousness. And for me, that's understanding that it's all God, that it's God that brings about these different conflicts, because it's a catalyst for you to learn to hold high frequency. And you can't fake it. You have to be able to look at it in a way that it's effortless now to hold high frequency. And now for me, is to just remember the oneness of God, the oneness of all things, and that this is the divine play bringing catalyst or difficulties of life in order for you to be able to face them and still see it as perfect and God while playing your role. Doesn't mean you just sit on the couch and just say, oh, no, it's all God and none of my business. If you're playing a role of being a soldier or a cop or a housewife or a husband, you have a role to play. You have to play it. But the trick is play the role, whatever side you've been tasked with playing, while holding high frequency. And that's the game. That's the game.
That ties into love and service. You know, I often say service without trades, right? So how much of our service is really a trade or a barter?
Right.
But loving service isn't a trade. It's a thing that it's complete, right? There's no waiting for something. And
well, like I told you from Baba's saying, my teacher's saying, is service without love is deplorable. Service with love is desirable. Love without service is divine. So what I realized, what he's talking about is 3 levels of consciousness, right? So service without love, right? So you're just going through the motions for the sake of the external appearance. Look at me, look at me, look at me. Look how wonderful I am. And that's just deplorable. It's deplorable from the perspective of divinity, because you've been given an opportunity, a catalyst, an opportunity to practice high frequency consciousness, and you don't, not even a little, right? So that's you're just completely wasting that opportunity this life has given you. So service with love is you're raising your frequency, you're doing service and adding some love. But many times it's exactly what you're talking about. Somewhere in your mind, it's a trade-off. It's a trade-off. You think you're pleasing God, so you want a little off the top of your karmic debt, or some blessings, maybe a little more income, a better car, whatever you think you're trading it for. Service, love without service it's just love. And the example that I give is a mother with a newborn baby, and the baby starts crying in the middle of the night. She doesn't stop and say, God, okay, I want you to just notice now that I'm giving up some of my sleep in order to take care of this little baby. So, I want to, she just jumps up because the love for that baby is she can't stand the thought of that baby suffering. So she just jumps up. It's not like wakes her husband up and did you see I just fed that baby and I changed his diaper. She's not looking for a pat on the back or anything. She's just operating from that pure hearted love, which is divinity. So that is high frequency consciousness with no pollution of a lower frequency consciousness mixed in. Whereas my teacher had said, he goes, yes, he said, for example, he said, a mother many times loves her children, but it can be polluted with attachment. So he's saying, okay, so she has divine love, but that attachment is a lower frequency consciousness polluting the purity of that high frequency, right? He said a husband can love his wife, but it can be polluted with lust. So there may be some divine love there, but it has some lower frequency consciousness mixed in, which pollutes it. So what does that mean? That means that part of the goal of this human life is to learn to hold that high frequency consciousness without pollutions of ego or desire or attachment or fear or whatever the lower frequency consciousness that can be mixed in, and basically prevents it from being the highest frequency consciousness that you're capable of achieving, which, going back to the science of it, is moving you that much closer back to source.
yes,
Does that make sense?
it does.
Yeah, and the more you understand it, the simpler it gets. First of all, you're turning within. This is what Bob had asked. He had asked one of his students, he goes, what's the difference between animal and human? And of course, like I said before, never try to answer, Bob, because you'll never get it right. You just say, I don't know. And so the answer was human can turn within. And that's a huge part of this spiritual path. I don't even like the term spiritual path, but a huge part of this transformational process is learning that a huge part of it is turning within and becoming cognizant of your frequency of consciousness. And then when you begin to have even a little taste of God's love, divine love, you realize, okay, so that's the standard by which I want to measure all my frequency and try to start moving it in that direction. And that's the game. And then go ahead.
It's intention based then, right? So me not being at a certain place one way or another almost doesn't matter, because there isn't necessarily a destination, but what's my intention in my moment?
Yeah. There's no, and that's what I realized, the spiritual path was just another illusion. There's no place to go. It's just a matter of raising your frequency throughout more and more aspects of your human existence, right? And then the immediate payoff is just much greater peace, joy, and happiness as you raise your frequency even a little bit, right? So that's the carrot that divinity holds out for us, carrot and stick, right? The carrot is, as you raise your frequency, you're happier, have more peace, right? I'd say you're even smarter, you're braver, you have more sense of humor. Life just gets easier. And the stick is, as you drop your frequency, it hurts. It hurts. But if you've never even tasted higher frequency consciousness, you don't have anything to compare it to. But I think everybody's had even a little experience of real love, like a grandma that just loves you no matter what, or peace, where maybe you're out in the mountains or whatever does it for you, and just feel this little bit of peace. So that's when we experience higher frequency, we all go, yeah, I want more of that. So that's how the infinite creator draws you home. Carrot and the stick. Lower your frequency, it hurts. Raise your frequency, it feels better. Pretty simple mechanism. Yeah.
It's simple enough for like an amoeba to know how to do it.
Yeah. And so we muck around with a lot of wrong concepts, and but once you're presented with an understanding of how it works, then you immediately can start getting better. But it's like going play a soccer game. You don't know any of the rules. I mean, what chance in hell do you have of winning that game when you're picking the ball up and you're running outside the stadium and everybody's yelling and screaming at you because you're an idiot, right? But once you understand the rules of the game, okay, now you can start to practice. Now you can get better and better and better at it. But if you have no concept, you don't have a chance. So this is just a basic understanding of who we are and why we're here and what the game is. And now, if you choose, you can start moving your frequency of consciousness up the vibrational scale, and an immediate feedback is it starts to feel better right away. But the human terms are forgiveness, compassion, understanding, courage, right? Those are all human terms we use for vibrational levels, right? Hate, anger, resentment, those are all just human terms for this feeling we get as we move up and down the vibrational scale.
That's beautiful. Well, and it's going to be enough for today.
I think so. Let's not open any other subject.
And hopefully we can do more of these.
Yeah, well, so my intention is we're going through a huge vibrational shift. The planet is, right? And we're moving from third density to fourth density. And we'll get into that another time. But so if you can raise your vibrational frequency up to fourth density, you move on to fourth grade. If you can't, you repeat third grade. In the meantime, as this frequency raises, it becomes more and more painful if you can't keep up with raising your vibrational frequency. And this is why you see people losing their effing minds these days, because they're holding on to third vibrational frequency in a planet that's shifted into fourth density. So it hurts. Once again, carrot and stick. Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, I really appreciate your willingness and your own, I mean, people that I believe have an intention to love for sake of love and for the sake of serving source and becoming more of themselves.
Yeah.
You're one of my people. So thank you. And I love you. Thank you so much.
All right, brother. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.